Hi there, my name is Tony. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we'll take a look at the three most popular handheld consoles of the early 90s, the Nintendo Game Boy, the Sega Game Gear, and the Atari Lynx. We'll see their strengths, their weaknesses, and the reasons why they failed or succeeded. We will also see how they compare against each other by putting them side by side and turning them on. I'll try to be brief and highlight only the key aspects of each console when I present them. First of all, the Nintendo Game Boy. Even though it was released in April '89, it's not only the most recognizable handheld console of the 90s, but arguably the most iconic device of that decade. It's an 8-bit console with a portrait-oriented 2.6 monochromatic screen. Its resolution is 160 by 144 pixels, and it is not backlit. Now this is by far the console's biggest disadvantage, as it is extremely difficult to see anything on this tiny screen unless you're playing in a very bright room or under direct sunlight. Many accessories were released to address this issue, like for example the Light Boy that was attached on the Game Boy and provided light and a magnifying lens. And while it definitely was an improvement, it was not ideal, because it added weight and bulk to an already hefty device. Now let's have a look at the button layout. This here is the D-pad, a 4-directional one, the A and B buttons, the select and start buttons, the 3.5mm headphone jack that provides stereo sound. This here is the mono speaker, the contrast slider, the volume slider, the external connector for the link cable for multiplayer games, the on and off switch, the cartridge slot, and here is the battery compartment that houses 4 AA batteries. Now, here is where the Game Boy's biggest flaw turns to an advantage. Because the screen is monochromatic and not backlit, the 4 batteries provide more than 15 hours of playtime. None of its competitors even come close to that performance. The Game Boy retailed at $89 at the time of its release, and this low pricing, the great battery life, and the excellent games were the main factors that made it a huge success. More than 120 million consoles, including Game Boy Pocket and Color, were sold until it was discontinued in 2003. There are hundreds of accessories created for it. We will mention a few in future videos. And literally every third-party developer wanted to make games for the Game Boy, resulting to a catalog of more than 1,000 games. Of course, the main attractions are Nintendo's own IPs like Tetris, which was the game most often bundled with the console and sold 35 million copies, the Pokemon franchise that skyrocketed the fame and sales of the console with 46 million copies sold, Super Mario Land and Wario Land games, the Legend of Zelda franchise, Kirby, Donkey Kong, Metroid, and many more. These achievements are even more impressive considering the fact that Game Boy was technologically inferior to its opponents, and there were many color variations over the years. This is the Game Boy, the original Game Boy, the DMG one. Later on, Nintendo released the Play It Loud series with many nice colors and some other special editions. We'll probably see them too in the future videos. And the Game Boy had many successors. We'll see them too in another video. Let's have a look at a couple of the most iconic and, in my opinion, great games of this console. Let me hook it up to a power supply and I'll be right back. I will be showing you all 3 devices connected to power supplies, and the reason for this is because I'm extremely cheap and didn't want to spend on batteries. So let's try Tetris first. This here is the cartridge. It does not want to come out. Here we go. On the first try. Awesome. Let's see what difference the contrast slider makes and what looks better. I guess that's kind of fine. Now, this screen was pretty bad for 1990s standards. For 2024 standards, there are not even words to describe this. But hey, it is what it is. And I also suck at this game. But my abilities are not the point of this video today. This is really embarrassing, so I'll turn it off and go to another amazing game. But most of you know Super Mario Land, the first Super Mario Land game. Whoops. Now we'll have to do the very scientific procedure of blowing the cartridge. And why not? Let's blow into the cartridge slot as well. Told you, science. That brings back memories, doesn't it? Let me find a good angle. Damn, is it hard to play with this screen. Okay, I think that's enough for now. Just a little bit more. Okay, we're good. I'll be right back. Moving on to the Game Gear from the also Japanese Sega, was released in October 1990 as a direct opponent to the Game Boy. It was marketed very aggressively against it, mocking Game Boy's screen and accusing it of being made for children, while the Game Gear had a more mature and cool approach. It is 8 bits like the Game Boy, but has an impressive for the time 3.2-inch backlit screen with 160 by 144 resolution, landscape orientation. What makes the display even more impressive is that it's a color one, with a palette of 4096 colors and the ability to show 32 of them on screen. So here we have the 1, 2 and start buttons. This here is the brightness slider. Here is the power switch, the jack for the input for the 9-volt power supply. This here is where you connect the gear-to-gear cable for multiplayer games. 3.5mm jack for stereo sound. This here is the speaker. This here is the volume slider. And if we turn to the back, we will see the cartridge slot and the source of the console's woes. The two battery compartments housing 3 AA batteries each. Now it took less than 4 times for the Game Gear to devour these 6 AA batteries. This was a fact not at all well received by the users. Many said that it was barely a portable console, since it had to be connected to a power supply almost all the time. People also criticized its relatively high price at about $149, its size, and the fact that it didn't have as many or as good games as the Game Boy. At least 300 of those were released, with some of the most important ones being, of course, the Sonic the Hedgehog games. The second one was the most successful Game Gear game with 400,000 copies sold. Columns, which was usually bundled with a Game Gear and was Sega's reply to Tetris. Shinobi, Streets of Rage, Wonder Boy, Ristar, many Disney games like Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck and more. And the truly remarkable Mortal Kombat port. It was amazing, guys. The Game Gear sold about 11 million units until it was discontinued in 1997, and while it was not a disaster by any means, it certainly never came close to the Game Boy levels of success. A quick side note, if any of you dig up your old Game Gear and it's not working, there is a 99% chance that you need to change its capacitors. The ones that Sega used were crap, and they failed over the years. It was succeeded by the Sega Nomad, which was a portable version of the Mega Drive or the Genesis, depending where you're from. So, let's hook this bad boy in, and I'll be right back with you. Now, when it comes to Game Gear games, this console shared most of its hardware with the Master System, which made porting of games from the home console to the handheld very easy. But Game Gear could also play the actual Master System cartridges with the help of the Master Gear adapter. Many more accessories were made for the Game Gear, like magnifying lenses, battery packs, cases, so on. But the more impressive and iconic of them was the TV tuner that turned the Game Gear to a portable color television. The two games I'll be showing you here is Columns and Ristar. I don't actually have a Sonic game to show you because I sold it a couple of years ago, because as I already told you, I'm super cheap. So, let's see if it will work on the first try. Now, I need to get all scientific again. Give me a second. That's more like it. Well, you gotta admit, things are better than the Game Boy. You can actually see what you're doing. And the most important thing is that you don't need to be in a bright room. You can play with the lights turned off, and you'll still see plenty enough. Yes, I also suck at this game. Puzzle games are not my thing. So let me try this angle as well. Let's see, restart. Nice. Has a sound effect too. The sound of failure. Oh, there's an intro too. Impressive. Kinda. This one is actually a very, very good platform game. Very well made. I did that on purpose, of course. Okay, I guess that's enough. You get the idea? We'll be right back. And finally, let's have a look at this behemoth, the Atari Lynx. With a release date of November 1989, it is the world's first color handheld. This one is actually the revised model that came 2 years later, but its differences are minor. Keep in mind that the original model is even bigger than this. In my opinion, they both are awe-inspiring and extremely well-built devices. It has an 8-bit CPU and interestingly a 16-bit coprocessor handling graphics. In the early 90s Greece, there was an urban legend among us kids about an obscure handheld console far more powerful than the Game Gear and the Game Boy, and having the same capabilities as the Super NES and the Mega Drive. When a cousin of mine bought that console in about 1993 and I held it in my hands, I realized that the rumors were greatly exaggerated. It has a unique button layout with many button combinations. You can see right here that if you press 2 buttons simultaneously, it will do different things. And it also has a switchable configuration for the left-handed. If you hold it like this, that's certainly something I would not expect to see in a gaming console in the late 80s. Now, this is the brightness slider. This is where the power supply goes. This is where the comlinks cable goes. This is for multiplayer games. The headphone jack. the volume slider, the A and B buttons that are reversed when you hold it upside down if you're left-handed. It has a 3.5-inch display with 160 by 102 pixel resolution, landscape orientation, 4096 colors, with 16 of them appearing on screen, and much like the Game Gear, it is powered by 6 AA batteries. They go right here, with more or less the same dreadful battery life as the Game Gear. In 1991, Atari released this revised version named Lynx 2, making small improvements to the battery life, the screen clarity. It now has stereo sound through the headphones, and lower price, $99, while the original costed $179. Atari managed to sell 2 million units until it was discontinued in 1995, and 73 games were released in that period. Some of the most well-known are California Games, Pac-Land, Slime World, Paperboy, Batman Returns, Stun Racer, Shadow of the Beast. Let's have a look at how this plays as well. We'll be right back. The game we will use for testing purposes is the Gates of Zendocon or something. Yeah. Now, it's pretty interesting how this thing goes in. Goes backwards, like that. Now, the first Atari games that were released for the Lynx did not have this raised lip, so it was super hard to remove it. They addressed this later. Now, let's see. On. First try. Well done, Atari. The Gates of Zendocon. I think there is an intro. Maybe I have to press a button or something, I don't remember. Okay. That's kind of creepy. Okay, I think that's enough for now. Great. Let's see what happens when I enter this gate. Okay, cool. And now, the moment of truth. This is how they look side by side. I know these cables aren't super attractive to look, but bear with me. Focus on the screens. That's what matters. I have obviously turned the volume sliders down. Just focus on the screens. So, that is all I have to say about these three legendary handhelds. If you have any questions or remarks, or if there is something you would like to see in a future video, let me know in the comments. Thank you all for watching. Bye.